Welcome to the Home Team, the show where no matter who you root for here, you are a part of the Home Team. I'm your host, Wyatt Bagnall, and today we are breaking down the Las Vegas Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs on Black Friday. Big game, big rivalry with lots of history to it. Record-wise, you probably wouldn't think this is going to be the most competitive game in the world. However, the Chiefs have played competitive games basically all year, regardless of how good or bad their competition is, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have another close one today. Before we get any further, hit like, hit subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And without any further ado, let's break this bad boy down. So, quarterback, let's be real about it. Patrick Mahomes is in this game, and the Raiders, Gardner Minshew's out for the year. I'm pretty sure Aiden O'Connell is going to be the one in there today. So we got to just give the point to Patrick Mahomes. Let's be real about it. There's only a few quarterbacks in this league that can stand toe-to-toe with him, and there's certainly not one out there for the Raiders today. Running back. I know that they activated Isaiah Pacheco's practice window. I heard that there's a chance he plays today. If he plays today, him and Kareem Hunt, it's a very good duo, and it's certainly better than anybody the Raiders are putting out there. The Raiders have sort of cycled guys after losing Josh Jacobs. The Josh Jacobs thing, it's like I understand why they wouldn't want to keep him, but if you're not going to keep a running back, then you do have to have a plan for how you replace him, and that's where the Raiders fell short. There's logic in the idea of we can't really keep this player, especially when we're not a team that's really in a position to do that. Like the teams that should pay running backs are teams that have the luxury to do it. Like when the Niners got McCaffrey, the Eagles and the Ravens, obviously this year with Saquon and Derrick Henry. Good teams that add an elite running back, it makes a huge difference. Bad teams paying an elite running back a lot of money, it doesn't make so much of a difference because the rest of the team is not ready to win. And as a result, I understand why the Raiders did what they did. However, you do have to have a viable plan to supplement that production. And whether that's two or three guys, that's up to you, but you do have to have the two or three guys, and they don't. And the Chiefs are a good team that have good backs, not great backs, but good backs. Pacheco in particular runs hard. If he's in the game today, that'd be nice to see. And Kareem Hunt is also a power runner. So the Chiefs have a good assortment of backs, so they get the point there too. Wide receivers. This is one where neither team, I would say, has a hugely potent receiving core. For the Chiefs, it's mostly DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy. And then for the Raiders, at the start of the year, it was like Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, guys like that. But now, Jacoby Myers, I know that he's dealt with injuries throughout the year. I'm not 100% sure if he's playing in this game or not. But it's not much in terms of threat, especially when you look at what the Chiefs defense is going to be able to throw at it. It's just not super likely that that's going to have a big day. Their best receiver is their tight end, much like the Chiefs, and we'll get to that in just a minute, where receiving core-wise, you give the point to the Chiefs. The Raiders, without Devontae Adams, it's just not quite as potent as you would like it to be, unfortunately. And while the Chiefs' offense is not super deadly at this point, they're super opportunistic. And if your defense breaks, and Xavier Worthy in particular gets open down the field, you got a problem. So I'll give the Chiefs a point. Now, tight end. Obviously, the Chiefs have Travis Kelce, and he is one of the better tight ends of all time. I don't personally rank him as high as some other people, but that's just my own preference in terms of I like tight ends that are a little more well-rounded. And if you're going to be just a receiving tight end, I would like to have seen it in a more physical era. I believe that it's just my stance on a lot of offensive players that many of them get these overinflated stats because they play in an era where you can't do all the things that were possible to do to stop them. And I prefer just more well-rounded guys that are more blockers also, because I just think that it's more impressive to actually be good at the entirety of the position rather than just half of it. But as a receiving threat, he's always been very dangerous. And he's less so now. It does seem that to a certain degree, age has caught up to him. But if you let the Chiefs get into like third and short, he's very, very dangerous because he doesn't necessarily run a route. He runs to open space, and Patrick Mahomes knows he's going to do that, and they've been playing together long enough that they both know where the open space is going to be. And he'll just lob the ball in there, and Travis Kelce will show up. So In critical situations, I would look out for Travis Kelce in particular. I don't know that they're going to be utilizing him as much just down to down this year, or if they are, they're going to do it later in the year and try to preserve him as much as possible for now. As for the Raiders, Brock Bowers is the rookie tight end for the Raiders, and he is a stud. He's a very good player. He's not as much of a blocker either at this point, but rookie tight ends, I don't care so much about that. I would rather that you just be able to be good at one part of it, because tight ends are historically slow to adapt to the NFL. It usually takes a couple years. And I think a great way to do that is essentially just let them focus on half the position to start. And that's what's happened with the Raiders. And it's also been out of necessity because he's the only weapon on that team that's producing. He's a great player. They got a good player. I don't know if it's a player that they needed in that draft, but he is really good. And if they get the quarterback position right, they're going to be very happy to have him. So who do I give the point to? If you were to tell me who I would rather have at this point, I would rather have Brock Bowers. But I, by no means, am going to be out here saying that Travis Kelce is a liability for the Chiefs and that the Chiefs aren't perfectly happy to have the guy they have. So they're both getting a point for the tight end position. Travis Kelce is the past and to some degree the present of the position, and Brock Bowers is the future of the position. So it's a very interesting matchup. I think that those two are guys that we're going to see quite a lot. I know Travis Kelce has the possibility to break a record today. He's tied with Tony Gonzalez for the most touchdown receptions in the history of the franchise, and Patrick Mahomes is tied with Len Dawson for the most touchdown passes. So if they were to break the record together, that would be a moment. So that's something for everybody to potentially look out for today, is we could see a record go down. As for the offensive lines, they're pretty different, I would say. The interior of the Chiefs is really strong, while the edges are really not. And with Max Crosby out there, I think that the Chiefs are going to have to be sending a lot of chips, because you don't want to leave those tackles one-on-one with Max Crosby all that often, in my opinion. We've seen teams get pressure recently. The Broncos in particular harass them. The Bills harass them. And I think if the Raiders are smart, they're going to try to do the same. This is something that could definitely derail the Chiefs' season. Any team that has that type of weakness, that can derail your season. But, I mean, like, it really started in the Denver game. Like, there was moments where the Chiefs weren't playing well offensively, especially on the offensive line, and they were giving up pressure. But the Broncos in particular hunted them. And I think that that's really important for teams to note going forward if you're going to try to beat Kansas City, because it's what Buffalo also did. And both of those teams, the Broncos and the Bills, outplayed the Chiefs. So the edges of the Chiefs' offensive line, I don't really like. The interior, though, is great. So that is where you really have to, pick your battles and attack them strategically. As for the Raiders, it's kind of the opposite. The interior is not particularly strong, but the tackles are all right. Colton Miller, in particular, is a good tackle at the left tackle spot. He's like a genuinely good player that not enough people talk about because he's a Raider, and the Raiders are always bad. But he's a good player, and whoever's rushing on that side is going to have a much harder time getting home than other people. And then, so in terms of the offensive line, they're both opposite, but they both played decent. So I'm going to give them both a point for that. Neither one's an elite unit, but neither one is a total disaster. They both can be had at different times, and I think that these teams had the chance to do a lot of damage. I mean, much like how the Raiders have Max Crosby on the edge right at the weakness, the Chiefs have Chris Jones right at the weakness. So I think that we could be seeing some good games from those guys in particular. The Chiefs will send a few blitzes up the middle, and I suspect at least a couple of them will get home. On to the defense. So, defensive line. These are two defensive lines that are kind of similar, although one is a better version. I would say that the best defensive lineman in this game, you could take your pick between Max Crosby or Chris Jones. I'm a big Max Crosby fan, because for him to do what he's doing when he's really the only elite player up on that front and really the only threat at all in the front seven, for him to still play at a high level is impressive. So I would say he's the best, but Chris Jones is, they're both top-tier guys at the edge and defensive tackle positions. So each team has one elite player along that group, and then they have some solid guys throughout it. If Christian Wilkins was still playing for the Raiders and not on IR, this would be a much more interesting game where the Raiders would have a much stronger defensive line, which is why I'm going to give the point to the Chiefs, because with guys like Karlaftis, who's a first-round pick, he's a solid player. They're just a little more well-rounded. And the Chiefs have had really good injury luck throughout the years. And at some point, you have to just say that it's not luck. Like, they draft guys that they probably prioritize durability, and they probably put a lot of effort into that in their strength and conditioning programs and with their training staff. And every team should do that. The Chiefs have had some pretty good luck with injuries, and the Raiders haven't. And at some point, I think you have to ask yourself why. And I think for the Chiefs offensively, it's because they play very finesse outside of Isaiah Pacheco. It's like, we're not going to run through everybody. We'll run out of bounds. We'll accept when the play is over. Whereas some other teams are like, yeah, we're going to run through it and see what happens. I think that that's a dangerous strategy for some teams. But the Chiefs, they know who they are and they stay within themselves. And I think that that goes quite well for them on the whole. So defensive line-wise, I'm going to give the edge to Kansas City because they've stayed healthier along that in that group, and the group that they intended to be out there throughout the year is out there, whereas the Raiders lost the second biggest piece to that whole thing, and as a result, the rest of the group is sort of not able to perform quite where you'd want it to, with the exception of Max Crosby, and even he's having more of a down year because everybody's just honing in. So I'll give the point to the Chiefs. Linebackers. For the Raiders, Robert Spillane's a good linebacker. Divine Diablo plays linebacker for them as well. One of the cooler names in the NFL, especially for a linebacker. Whereas Kansas City, Nick Bolton, Leo Chenal, Drew Tranquill. That's a very good linebacking group. I think Robert Spillane's made impact plays, but I don't think he would be in the top three linebackers for the Kansas City Chiefs. So as a result, the Chiefs get the point there. You could debate about who the best linebacker in Kansas City is. I would say it's Leo Chenal. Nick Bolton's a very good tackling backer, but Leo Chenal I think is a little more well-rounded. So I would say he's the best backer, followed by Nick Bolton, and then Drew Tranquill, who is a really good third linebacker to have. So I would give the Chiefs the edge there. Secondary-wise, the Raiders have Trayvon Merrick, who's a good safety, but they're still struggling at basically all the other spots. Whereas Kansas City, Trent McDuffie is the best in the secondary, but then you have a guy like Justin Reed who's very versatile back at safety, another good safety. And the Chiefs are also just, when you take into account Steve Spagnuolo, and they know how to attack, the Chiefs secondary is put into a position to succeed, and they're built to play man coverage. And when you look at the Raiders, you're not scared to play man coverage, and it plays into their hands. So I'm going to give the advantage to the Chiefs here. So the Chiefs get an advantage at all three levels of the defense. Even though Max Crosby is likely to be able to take over a game, that would be the Raiders' defense best path, is they have to be able to just disrupt up front because their secondary is not necessarily built, or I mean they might have tried to, but it hasn't panned out where they're able to line it up and beat people. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So on to coaching. Andy Reid against Antonio Pierce. I mean, sorry, it's Andy Reid. Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in the NFL. I know a lot of people want to be like he is the best coach. Very, very possible. I think that that's a little bit whoever the best or I think that putting these guys in tiers is more realistic than saying who's best and who's not, because a lot of it is he's got Patrick Mahomes, So he's a great coach. And he's certainly one of the top 5 coaches at any time he's been in the league, and it's made even more special by the fact that he has the quarterback that he always would have wanted to have. So he gets the edge there for sure. He's easily one of the best coaches ever. He's a Hall of Famer, and so the Chiefs have the advantage there. So essentially, I'm willing to give the Chiefs an advantage or a tie everywhere in this game. And the Raiders get points for tying at tight end and offensive line. Who do I want to win this game? I would love to see the Raiders win this game, just because I think we all are perfectly fine if we see Kansas City lose. So I don't mind it on the concept of, Kansas City can get beat by the Raiders. That's fine by me. But I'm also a realist. Kansas City's going to win this game, I would imagine. I think it's going to be a closer game than it should be, because Kansas City just seems to be that team this year where they're going to play up and down to their competition. I mean, they let Carolina put up 27 on them last week and just barely escape from them. Every game they're playing is close. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a close game. But if there was a game for the Chiefs to get a blowout, this version of the Raiders is a pretty likely candidate. So I hope everybody has a great day. Chiefs and Raiders fans, I hope your teams come out of this healthy. I hope everybody enjoys their Black Friday shopping. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hit like, hit subscribe, share this video. Thank you so much. Peace.